Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Tired Boys podcast. I'm your host, Justin.
And I'm Aaron. Welcome back, everyone, for another week. We have a pretty busy episode, even without it being a race weekend this past weekend. We've, of course, got the upcoming Australian Grand Prix. We're going to do a little bit of a different episode, though. We'll have some of the normal segments, quick hitters, but we're going to do a get to know for the Australian Grand Prix and some of the history. But looking forward to getting into all the meat of this episode.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good one. I was able to throw Aaron a little bit of a curveball here right before the start of the episode. So hopefully you enjoy a bit of a new segment as we take it through for the first time. But yeah, before we get to all that, let's roll the intro. Just
You're
this
not
chatbot
2D.
for me. Yeah. So it was fun to reach out and touch you, my friend.
Circuit of the Americas is where it's a track that was created for racing.
So the race is a flat fee, and then it's the bake off afterwards where things get really kooky.
Okay, that's where all the weirdness comes in. Mercedes definitely started planning for their new car.
If Red Bull came out and was just like, Adrian Newey designed our car.
Yeah.
Whoa. Yeah, did he really?
No way.
All right, very cool. Let's just start with some quick hitters here before we talk about the Australian Grand Prix. So, Aaron, won't you tee us up with the first one here?
Yeah, so looking at some just other general motorsports, came across my feed, but the Mazda Cup Challenge, which is a Mazda MX-5 Spec Series, was this past weekend. They had two races, but in the second race, the finish of the race was extremely close. We had the top five finishing under 0.2 of a second apart from each other, with three people in essentially a photo finish right at the end. It looked like Cars, where Lightning McQueen sticks out his tongue right at the end to get across the finish line. But I just thought it was pretty cool seeing just such a highly competitive race. So.
Yeah, it was the clip of the final stretch, going through the last couple turns, honestly, between those five cars could have been anybody's game. And then, even into the last turn, it kind of ends up just being a drag race down the final straight. So that's like a quite exciting way, not only just for any race to finish, but I imagine for all the drivers involved, like they all must have felt like, it was within their grasp at least. So yeah, that was a very fun clip to see from a series that I've never even heard of. That's very cool.
Yeah, and pretty. It's exciting seeing like these close gaps. We'll see them a lot of times in F1 in qualifying, not too typically that close at the end of a race. So a pretty cool moment that we don't get to see too often with our normal watching. But looking to the upcoming weekend in IndyCar, we do have a kind of specialty event. You had done a little more research, so why don't you tell the folks about the IndyCar Series $1 Million Challenge?
Yeah, I was just interested to see after we had talked last time about the first IndyCar race. That was pretty exciting and interesting. I was curious when the next one was. And I guess they're teaming up with a company called Thermal for what seems to be a little bit of an all-star race, but a little bit of a different twist on it, where normally you think all-star, like, okay, it's just basically a show match. But what's interesting is it's not really a show match. Like, it seems like the purse is quite large. I believe it's $1 million challenge. I'm guessing $1 million for first, and then some breakdowns after that. But that's a quite interesting reward for a race win. What's interesting about it to me though is not for points in the IndyCar series though. So it is, you're taking time out from your normal point scoring races, but that could be a big influx of cash, maybe help the team, help the driver. So yeah, just super interesting weekend coming up here for IndyCar.
Yeah, and so looking at the some of the details for the event and everything, it has a total of 1.756 million for the total purse across the drivers, which is the largest purse outside of the Indy 500. So that's a pretty cool, pretty big event. Two heats after the qualifications that will lead into I guess it looks like top 12 drivers from the field making the all-star race at the end for the finals. But it's definitely going to be a cool event. A couple that looks like pretty short heats and races, 20 laps, only 61 miles. I feel like with IndyCar, it's typically they kind of go the other way because they refuel, so going with longer races, but more of a sprint race format for this upcoming weekend, which will be fun to check out.
Yeah, super interesting. A lot of different elements that aren't common for an IndyCar weekend. So yeah, it just stood out to me, and I just wanted to talk about that with you a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and to move on into some kind of F1 chatter, to start out, there was a report that apparently with Lewis's move to Ferrari this coming season, Bono, his race engineer, most likely will not be able to go with him due to some anti-poaching clauses in whether it's in contracts or just in kind of the rule of Formula One. So it looks like Lewis will have to kind of adjust to a new race engineer, which will also just be kind of interesting to see how that interaction is. Because Lewis is obviously so comfortable with Bono as his race engineer for years now that will be along with changing entire teams, engineering staff, all the staff around you, losing that kind of like top guy during your race weekend may make that a little bit of a tough transition. I mean, Lewis has switched teams before, but it's tough to replace.
Yeah, I imagine that relationship would be quite important to a driver. I'm curious if you don't just go to your new Ferrari engineer and just say, all right, look, I need you in a British accent to just tell me, get in there, Lewis. At the end,
it's hammer time.
It's hammer time. He's like, I need you to say these catchphrases to me. And he he begins molding him early into, a Bono V2. We obviously know it's not going to be as good, but yeah, I imagine he just is going to be able to be quite assertive in his relationship and just say, hey, for me to perform, this is what I need.
All joking aside, I think that's honestly a pretty reasonable way to approach things and just be like, hey, it may not be talking a British accent and say these catchphrases, but I imagine Lewis and his new race engineer will have a sit down and be like, hey, Lewis will probably be like, this is what I heard from radio messages this past season between you and Carlos, because it's currently Carlos's race engineer. Like, this is what I heard. I like this. I don't like this. This is going to be your best way to communicate. I think especially someone of Lewis's just like experience and everything in Formula One. And he's a very articulate person. I feel like he'll be able to kind of lay out, hey, this is what I want to hear. This is what I don't want you to say. Like, if you don't know what's going on, find out for me. I don't want to hear checking, like, copy Lewis, let me find out. Like, not, and like, don't, or I don't know, maybe have some prepared answers, but I won't roast Ferrari's engineering, their pit wall too hard. they've had an
Yeah,
okay start to the year, but
yeah, we don't know, you
I won't.
know.
I won't go down that rabbit hole unless this year ends up with Charles being like, can I pit stop now? And they're like, checking. We'll get back to you, Charles. So I think Lewis will be able to kind of lay out what he's looking for a bit better than most. So
For sure. Yeah, I would definitely agree. And anytime we bring up Ferrari's woes, I just picture Carlos standing outside of that burning Ferrari.
well, and then I was watching. I forget what I was watching. I think it was a replay from last season in Drive to Survive of Carlos winning in Singapore and going like my first smooth operation in Ferrari, and then I was immediately like, ooh, and then he's just getting replaced.
Yeah.
But
One and only win unless he grabs some up this year.
yeah, he'll have a shot, but we'll talk about him a little bit more as we're getting into the upcoming week. But to just keep kind of up to date with the Red Bull Christian Horner saga and everything, there had been reports, of course, that he would be let go before the Australian Grand Prix. I haven't seen anything now a week or so later that has confirmed or kind of pressed that any further, but a formal complaint was lodged now with the FIA from the employee who had put in the complaint with Red Bull about Christian Horner's behavior. So we'll wait and see. It seems like there's a very bizarre web of kind of power, not power struggles, but like who's in charge of things at Red Bull, between like the 51% Thai owners along with the 49% like Mintzlaff family owner, along with the CEO of Red Bull and Christian Horner and Helmut Marko. There's a lot of like, it seems like pressure from different areas on firing, not firing, and so it's kind of just a like wait and see, because it's, and I know we said that, but it just seems like the right move would be to just move away from Christian Horner and move forward with the team. You have a lot of, I mean, I said it like there's, with Christian Horner like him staying or leaving, I feel like is going to cause people to leave. But if you keep a better atmosphere with him leaving, in my opinion. So we'll see what they decide to do. It seemed like they were going to let him go, but now as we're on Tuesday the 19th and race weekend starts in 2 days essentially, I feel like things would have moved a little more right by now if they were going to. So
Yeah, could do. But often that is the state of just like an ongoing, it basically like kind of legal battle at this point. We just kind of provide the updates that we have, and if it's not much, it's not much, whatever, and then we can just move on to other news. But obviously, we'll still want to keep apprised of the situation and understand what's going on. Because I think. I think a lot of eyes are on the situation. Unfortunately, maybe more eyes on that than on the actual racing at this point, and some other storylines. But it's just good to get the updates. But
yeah, so we can move along to the Aston Martin updates, which basically
see, this is interesting.
Yeah, so there were some reports. Aston Martin had talked about being very confident in their mid-season upgrades, feeling like they can eliminate the gap to Red Bull, which I think is extremely bold kind of statement coming from a team that went from a top 2 team at the start of the season last year to finishing, I believe it was P5 in the Constructors' Championship. They really just slid backwards. and primarily due to just being outdeveloped by the other teams. It wasn't um, any failure in driving really for the most part with them kind of sliding down. Every other team had a similar amount of issues and all that Aston Martin had, but to just slide backwards like that, there's a lot of question marks, I think, for most people with how their development is going to go this year. But they seem to feel pretty strongly that they're going to be able to close that gap a bit.
Yeah, and you hope so, because honestly, like when Aston Martin was doing well, you have Fernando Alonso on the podium a couple of times, and so you have to think like, all right, so he's capable of racing better than a lot of the guys that are on the grid, if in similar equipment, if not better equipment. So yeah, then you kind of look at like, all right, so the team doesn't really have to look at like a driver lineup change that much, where it's more of a concern on like, okay, how do we get this car and development plan on the right track and in a path that's going to be competitive at the stages that other cars will be upping the ante, if you will.
Yeah, and I think like looking at keeping up with that pace of development and everything and having the quality of drivers, another big thing and probably a reason that they're kind of people from their team are being vocal about this is they have a good driver who is not
Right.
signed to renew for a contract next year currently. Alonso, there's this whole silly season like waiting to just tumble. The Lewis move could have been well, it of course now is what topples the dominoes, but the second one's taking a while to fall, and Alonso still has options. Like there is the potential for a number of seats being open. The Mercedes seat is open. There's potential for a Red Bull seat. There's potential for some of these front runners. And just knowing Fernando Alonso and how he has been willing to make these changes with his career from team to team, looking for the best opportunity, they're not guaranteed to have him next year. So coming out and kind of putting up that initial statement of like, we're confident in us this year, that we're going to continue to push forward and everything, that is something that of course they want to speak into Alonso's head as well. If they think he's as high quality of a driver as I feel like he is, that they would want to keep around for the upcoming season.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. It seems like he is not past his prime. And to your point, the move to Aston Martin was kind of predicated on the idea that it was going to be better than the Alpine at the time and
Mm-hmm.
put him in a position to like actually be winning races or, be on a podium. And for a little bit, the team was able to provide that. I'm curious in Fernando's mind how long he waits. Does he kind of go on the back burner, if you will, for all of 2024 if Aston Martin's development plans are not as good as they're optimistic about? Like, yeah, then you're asking questions of how long does this driver wait around if he still feels like, and there's belief in other areas of the paddock, that like he can still get on the podium, which just last year he was doing, right? So it's
Yeah.
I don't think a far gone conclusion to say, yeah, this guy would likely leave for a better vehicle if presented.
Yeah, and looking at that with Alonso and all, like he, I think he's shown that he has the ability. Like you said, he's had podiums and all, but I think that he, or kind of the chain of movement. It's weird. It's it could be potentially drivers weighing their options, but I think with so many drivers being like not having contracts at the end of the season currently, there's a lot more potential kind of leaning towards waiting till Mercedes is like the next domino. Where I think once they make their decision on things, that's when everything else will slowly kind of scramble into play, or quickly kind of scramble into place. So it could be that we're waiting to just hear from Mercedes because they want to see how Kimi Antonelli does. I think they maybe want to see how some of these other drivers continue to do before they make a pretty huge decision organizationally on who can try and fill the shoes of Lewis Hamilton in the team.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a big
No.
shoe to fill.
No, I don't think you're doing that. I don't think you're doing that. I think George Russell becomes team captain for sure, and Mercedes is in a like, okay, we're rebuilding this franchise. We're not trying to fill these shoes. We're trying to
You don't
teach
think
George
they would
now.
go to like? You think they're going young instead of an older, like veteran kind of talent?
For my money, I think that's what they do.
All right. I mean, I think it's tough because Toto's such a strong competitor. He's got that like fire in him. Like he wears anger on his face at all times. Like he looks like ready to just go at any moment. And it is so difficult to imagine them doing that. I mean, they really in their history have not gone for a unproven kind of talent. They started off with like Jensen Button and I forget who else, like, but they're starting with like veteran drivers when they purchased the team and everything. Then of course they had Michael Schumacher, they've had Lewis Hamilton, they've had Valtteri had driven for Williams for multiple seasons before coming in. Nico Rosberg, like George was on Williams for years before coming to Mercedes. So it's hard just in general to imagine. I mean, similarly to like Ferrari, I forget, I saw a stat somewhere and I wish I had saved it, but it's been like decades since Ferrari has put probably like 30 to 40 years since Ferrari's put a rookie into their seat, like for as a like primary driver, as opposed to like Ollie Behrman filling in.
Okay, yeah, but see, that's what I'm saying. I feel like George would be lead driver and they wouldn't be recruiting for a number one.
That maybe not
like right now George is
for
driving better
one.
than Lewis.
Yeah,
why would he not?
Maybe not recruiting for a number one, but recruiting still a veteran like person to compete with him, as opposed to trying to bring someone up through the farm system.
Yeah, interesting. I just don't. We don't have enough information.
Oh, definitely not.
Like both strategies seem reasonable. I just feel like if Lewis has to have a massive footprint, not just on like his side of the garage, but so much of it for so many years would have been like all about Lewis as the driver. All the systems would be built around him, not just like the car systems, but like how they operate in meetings and all of this. And I just feel like it would be so hard to try and fit a Fernando into that, or fit a like a Carlos Sainz into that, where they would just say like, all right, honestly, we're packing all of this up and we're just starting fresh. I feel like the start fresh would be easier with one of these like soon to be proven rookies that you've been talking about, as opposed to, you know, teaching an old dog new tricks.
That, I mean, I could definitely understand that side of it. It's just, it's tough to imagine just based on their track record, but
Of course.
at the same time though, like that could be what the delay is for Mercedes, like looking to make sure that they have that second guy locked in and kind of
Mm-hmm.
holding up the rest of the moves for different teams. Because I guarantee there will be drivers who are holding out on signing or re-signing contracts with their current teams and everything until they know that they're out of contention. And so
Mm-hmm.
maybe Mercedes is looking to wait and see as the year progresses, like are some of these younger talents, like who they feel happy putting in the seat, and if not, then okay, maybe we move to another veteran on the grid for a short contract, 1 year, 2 years, and let some of the talents kind of grow.
Interesting.
But yeah,
Not do
they're
their growth period yet.
yeah, and just kind of
Interesting.
push that off a little bit. George is still young. Like George still has plenty of good years ahead of him in Formula One. So
Mm-hmm.
I think he obviously is passionate about wanting to compete for championships and everything. He's very
Yeah.
been vocal since he's moved to Mercedes, but I just can't imagine him leaving the Mercedes program of his own will. He
No, neither can
seems
I.
like a Mercedes like just guy.
Sure. Well, bro, and I'm saying like he's putting up results right
He
now.
is. He is.
Why wouldn't you
Absolutely.
want to build a team around him?
But also, I mean, if he's like, I want to compete for championships, and they're like, well, we're gonna throw a rookie next to you, then even though I feel like that is not his optimal way to get there, I just don't imagine him ever leaving Mercedes. Like, I feel like it would be
Yeah.
weird for him to be like, even when he was in Williams, everyone was
Well,
like
I mean, we just said that
Mercedes
about Lewis,
Junior.
so
Yeah, that's true. Lewis, I, but at least Lewis had been like he had won a world championship with McLaren already.
okay.
So like he had result like with George and Williams, it was like they were just like training him to not crash so he could
Oh
get
yeah,
in
it's
the
a farm
Mercedes.
team for
Yeah.
sure. You're not winning anything there. Not
So
not in those years for sure.
not in those years. So I just imagine that might be a tough pill to swallow, even though he'll be the team leader, like in both like performance as well as veteran leadership. That
Hmm.
it'll just be very interesting to see. But I would not be
Definitely.
shocked to see either way. I can really see both kind of happening and going with someone veteran to just let a little more time pass for the young guns to get some growth. But
Hmm.
uh,
Yeah, but right now everybody in a holding pattern. The old Mexican standoff with the roster moves.
yeah,
But yeah.
but looking at Aston Martin just a little bit further, there are some rumors that Aramco Oil is looking to purchase the team from Lawrence Stroll, and if so, of course they have these big dreams of signing Max Verstappen and Adrian Newey away with their oil money from Red Bull,
Let's do
and
it.
I mean, it would be a big shakeup. It would be a huge influx of money, which is weird to say when you're talking about a billionaire owning the team already. But
Sure.
at the same time, um, it would be interesting to see. I think that would be still tough to get Max away from Red Bull. I don't think that's going to be an easy task for anyone, but um, that would be an interesting shakeup to probably the driver market, along with, of course, the teams with the new ownership and all.
Yeah, because I'm curious, like, just small thought here. I'm curious if Lance has proven himself enough, like, to be a driver that like a purchasing team would keep, or if they just, he's just gone, take him out with the trash.
I would if I feel like his career would be towards its end if the company got purchased away from his dad.
That'd be my
So,
sense. At least for Formula One,
and
I could
he's
see him racing other series
oh,
though.
absolutely. And it's not like we've talked about it. Lance isn't a bad driver. I think he just makes a few too many like small mistakes that someone of his
Hmm.
experience shouldn't. That end up making him look questionable.
Sure.
Um,
No, I think that's a good way to put it.
but yeah, I think I imagine him continuing to drive in and kind of test his medal in some other series, of course, if he is ever out of Formula One.
Hmm.
Um, or maybe he'll just move back to Canada and just be skiing and enjoying the slopes and enjoying his time at home.
A
But you never know. But to move on from the quick hitter segment to
for
our
sure.
new segment, the get to know, talking about the history of the Australian Grand Prix, I will let you lead off with your segment here.
All right, so I thought it would be interesting instead of basically just reading the people at Wikipedia page, maybe do something a little interesting. And I thought it'd be fun to put Aaron in the hot seat. So I cooked up 5 questions that are, generally related to the Australian Grand Prix. And I just want to see, if he was diligent in his research, how much does he really know about the Australian Grand Prix? So we're here to put Aaron in the hot seat and test his knowledge. So the Australian Grand Prix, as we know it today, is part of the Formula One World Championship. However, there were and are still a bunch of tracks and circuits in Australia that were raced like actually long before Formula One had an Australian Grand Prix.
Oh,
So, my first question to you is when did the Australian Grand Prix become a part of the Formula 1 world competition? So your choices are A,
um,
1967, B, 1952, or C, 1985. When did the
1985.
Australian GP, yep, become a part
Yeah.
of the Formula 1 world competition? C, you got it right, 1985. There were a bunch of, series held before this.
I thought you were gonna ask about that because I straight up just like going through the different information that I started at 1985. Basically, I saw
Sure.
that there was a bunch of stuff before. I was like, that doesn't matter.
Leave it to me to dig up the ancient history, dude. It's pretty exciting. All right, but here we go. Question number 2. This one may throw you. Which two individuals from Down Under were the first notable engineer drivers? So these were individuals that were building their car and racing in the series at the same time. Formula One engineer drivers. A, is it Sterling Moss and Jean Barra? Is it B, Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna? Or is it C, Jack Brabham and Bruce McLaren?
It would be C. Jack Brabham and Bruce McLaren.
My man knows his shit. So Jack Brabham and both Bruce McLaren were, the drivers and the namesakes for the racing teams that were in the Formula One competition at the time. What was very interesting about these guys when they were racing, they were developing cars that were pushing out what were known as these Australian specials. And these were just like these local cars that like just dudes from Australia were building in their local communities, taking to the track and like and testing them against the top drivers. But then when you have money coming from dudes like Brabham and McLaren, their builds began to kind of push these, they called them specials, they began to push them kind of out of the scene.
Interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
I remembered seeing a lot of Brabhams in the Australian driver history.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Lot of
Big
big
name.
family.
Yeah, I mean for sure, and honestly did a lot for Australian motorsport, which is very cool. All right, question number 3: which driver and car combo won the final F1 race at Adelaide in '95? Is it A, Schumacher in his Benetton? Is it B, Damon Hill in his Williams? Or is it C, Jos Verstappen in his Ford?
I'm gonna go with B, but I'm between A and B. I'm gonna go with B though.
B, final answer?
Yep.
B is correct. Damon Hill in his Williams won the final race at Adelaide in '95.
To
Adelaide
be
had a
honest,
stretch.
I don't know if
What?
Yos has won a race.
I'm not sure he has anyway. That was kind of a gimme. That was kind of a gimme one there for you.
Knock it out.
Um,
Yeah.
Number 4, question number 4. Which driver holds the current lap record for the modern layout of Albert Park? Is it A, Sergio Perez with Red Bull? Is it B, Lewis Hamilton in a Mercedes? Or is it C, Valtteri Bottas in a Mercedes?
And we're just considering Albert Park, or are we considering?
Yeah, just Albert Park.
Okay, because there were track changes, I think 2 years ago.
So yeah, think of like the most up to date iteration that you can think of. That's the answer I'm looking for. So is it Sergio, Lewis, or Valtteri?
I'm gonna say I'm gonna give it to Lewis.
Damn. Okay, first wrong answer. It is A, Sergio Perez in the Red
Okay,
Bull.
I was
He holds the
between
track
them,
record.
but I didn't remember. I know who won the last couple years there, but I didn't remember fastest laps and it like what that would be. So I thought maybe a Lewis qualifying might have
Sure.
set a
Dude,
heater out there.
I knew putting Lewis Hamilton in there would throw you off. Like how can you bet against the guy if you're
It's
thinking
tough.
like recent history? Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely.
All right. All right, so curveball landed. So you're 3-1 right now. Last question. Which constructor has the most wins at the Australian Grand Prix? Now, this answer includes all tracks and all events. So it's sum total.
Okay.
Is it A, Bugatti? Is it B, Ferrari? Or is it C, McLaren? Tough one.
That is tough. I think I'm gonna go with Ferrari because I know that Seb Vettel's won a number of times. I know Schumacher's won a number of times. So a couple of multi-time winners. Charles Leclerc won in 2022. So I'm gonna go with Ferrari.
Okay, using your historical knowledge to inform
Little
your
bit.
answer. I like it.
Trying
Okay.
to.
So B, final answer?
Yeah.
Sure you don't want to change it?
I probably should because Bugatti I feel like doesn't make sense to be in there otherwise, but I'm gonna stick with it since I committed to it. So
B, Ferrari is the correct answer. Bugatti, I believe, only has like 4 to 6 victories. Ferrari has
Okay.
13.
Oh,
McLaren has 12 though. So that's the one that you could have went either way
well,
on.
I thought about it with McLaren because obviously you were talking about Bruce McLaren and the history of them being an Australian company originally and all, but yeah, I just had to. I just remember seeing Schumacher, someone else, Schumacher,
Sure.
Vettel. So
Yeah.
I had to stick with it there.
Damn. All right. So pretty solid hot seat. 4-1 for your first time. Didn't really get burned here. Maybe just a little bit of a singe. So Aaron, that was pretty good. You seem to know your Australian GP pretty well.
Yeah, I did a little bit of digging, but I thought that was fun for me. So we'll I think either have to keep that going. You can grill me, or vice versa, and shift that around. But I liked the hot seat segment.
Hell yeah. Let me just tell you something. This I thought was very interesting. So, when looking at the kind of pre F1 championship days of the Australian Grand Prix, one kind of era really stood out to me. So, in between the years of 1964 and 1965. So the F1 World Championship started in 1950. So like it's been going for a long time. There's what's been referred to as the golden age of racing. It was called the Tasman Series, named for the Tasman Sea in between New Zealand and Australia. So it was held annually, like I said, from 1964 to 75. And what was interesting about it is it was held in the winter months when Formula One was off for the winter. So
Okay.
a bunch of like current current to date drivers would move down to Australia for a couple of weeks and just race in this winter series. So it was just like this like almost training camp for Formula 1 racers where people could go and just watch them basically stay fit over the winter, race like different and interesting cars. You had names like Jim Clark, Jackie Stewart, Graham Hill, John Surtees, like just so many guys going down in the off season to race. And I just thought that was the coolest thing where like now, that's unheard of. They're working out, doing other things. They've got a bunch of other projects. And it didn't last forever. It was only about 10 years before, a bunch of big money started to come in and, it was more demanding in the off season of the teams and the drivers. But here you had just this like 10-year stretch where drivers were like, fuck it. I want to be racing. I want to be in these cars. So they would just go down to Australia and do just that.
Oh, that's awesome. And looking kind of at that time period, the different circuits that were raced and everything are pretty interesting. Longford, which was on the, I guess that's in Tasmania, actually, potentially, or somewhere in that little island off of Australia there. I think that's Tasmania.
Okay.
But yeah, a lot of different locations, races in Perth and kind of all over the eastern coast of Australia. But I didn't realize that was all in the kind of F1 off season.
Oh yeah, for sure, and that's what I thought was so sweet about it was it gives you kind of an interesting glimpse into how they used to spend their time. Where now it's like so closed off and everybody's just like working in their own camps. Yeah, interesting stuff in that regard. But that does bring us up to once the a couple years after that, that does bring us up to once the Australian Grand Prix was adopted for the Formula One World Championship, and as we talked about, it starts in Adelaide. So it was not always in Melbourne at Albert Park. It starts in Adelaide.
Yeah, so starting in Adelaide from 1985 all the way through 1995, and so it seemed like from what I was seeing that the local governments in the Adelaide area just didn't end up renewing the contract for the Formula One racing to continue there. However, that I think it was kind of more of a political decision to not renew that contract, which is when it switched over to Albert Park in Melbourne in 1996. But for quite some time, and I didn't end up finding when it started to be the first race of the season, but it was recently up until we were starting over in Bahrain and everything in Saudi Arabia that Australia had been the start of the Formula One calendar for a number of years.
Interestingly, though, a lot of the what would you say? A lot of the like key moments for the drivers like would happen at this Australian Grand Prix. So yeah, there was a good amount of shenanigans that would happen even at the start of the calendar.
Yeah, and of course that also kind of had some to play with like cars being a little less reliable sometimes as they were working out kinks early on in the season and whatnot. But looking at some of the kind of bigger moments from Australian Grand Prix in 2003, we had a pretty interesting start with Michael Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello with Ferrari at the top of the qualifying sessions. Juan Pablo Montoya in third. Had David Coulthard starting out in P11, who eventually ended up going on to win the race. But it was just kind of an insane race. Michael Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello were both, after 2 laps, they were both like 1.5 seconds away from the drivers behind them, and just like gapping them consistently until Barrichello's Ferrari kind of kicked the bucket on him mid-race. But with just that, along with some other craziness, David Coulthard ends up coming up through, making up a lot of places and finishing P1 with Juan Pablo Montoya in P2. And I believe this was Kimi Räikkönen's, it was one of his first seasons when in Formula One. I think it was maybe his second or third season in Formula One.
Okay.
With McLaren Mercedes finishing on the podium, pushing Michael Schumacher off.
Gotcha. Okay. I just want to go back 1 second. You were saying what years was Australia the start of the F1 calendar?
So for whatever, I Googled it and I don't remember finding it.
Gotcha. Because a bunch of what I was encountering was specifically at Adelaide when that was on the calendar. It was the last race of the season, usually coming after Japan at Suzuka, and because if you remember, that's when like Prost and Senna kept coming together. There was all that drama at the end of the season. Do you remember in 1989 where Prost comes in, he retires because it's raining buckets. Senna goes out, pushes hard, crashes, gives Prost the championship. So if I remember correctly, it used to be at the end of the year, which is why there was so much drama around it all the time, because it had so much implication for the championship.
Yeah, and so it did. But there were
Okay, cool.
no, you're 100% right. But there were
Okay, we're on the same page then.
Yeah, there were a number of years. So I think it was like maybe started in the 2010s.
Okay.
But the races were typically in March there in Australia once they got to that point. And so it might have even been earlier than that in the like 2000s. So, but I was having trouble like from Googling it, finding the specific, like I just wasn't getting the results of like when it became the first race on the calendar and everything. And I,
Sure.
to be honest, didn't want to just click back year after year on the F1 like race results thing to just look again and again at when it was.
There you go.
So I Googled
It'd
it,
be one way to do it.
hoping to find the answer. Didn't, and I was like, not really the biggest deal. But it did have a number of moments, like you were saying, that were kind of season deciding in the championship, where then it shifted to being one of the first races on the calendar for a number of years up until I think 2018 maybe. So,
Sure. Yeah. So ignore my earlier point of saying shenanigans at the start of the season. I was trying to reconcile what you said with the data that I have here, and I was just
Yeah.
my brain literally broke on that point.
No,
But
all
yeah, all
good.
right. So we get it corrected here. The one thing I want to talk about as far as races before your 2003 one, what I thought was interesting in '95, Mika Hakkinen crashes out, I believe, like in a qualifying session, has to have trackside surgery on his throat, I believe. And, that's like what saves him and, it brings him back to racing the following year. But
Wow.
what I find so interesting, not the crash, what it does is it kind of spurred those team the that driver and team to kind of bring safety awareness kind of to the paddock, and it began the conversation for like better safety solutions and always trying to keep the drivers safe while racing. So I thought that was pretty key in the kind of Australian history, is a couple of bad crashes there, but also using that to spur on greater safety measures.
Were there any specific like measures that came? Like I remember recently seeing something about the history of the F1 safety car, but I mean
Hmm.
that like for one, and having the on-site medical, like that wouldn't shock me if that had spurred from that. I just don't know.
Yeah, I don't think they talked about anything specific. I think it was just more of like a general awareness in the paddock, and became like more of an accepted conversation, and more people were willing to like hear ideas.
Interesting. Okay. And
Yeah.
so yeah, that's definitely I mean good to have spurred that forward and everything. And I'm trying to
Hmm.
see. So you said, who was it? Mika Hakkinen that.
Mika Hakkinen, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so that's kind of some of the history from the Adelaide era. The race that Aaron was talking about, 2003, with the Coulthard win and Barrichello and Schumacher. That's that's in the modern Albert Park, Melbourne era. I thought one race that was pretty interesting, kind of around the same time, was 2002, where you have Australian national Mark Webber on the podium, but also not only that, the team owner at the time, Paul Stoddard, is a Australian national as well. So kind of one of the more notable as far as like Australians succeeding at the Australian GP. That's a little bit of the more potent ones, I guess you would say.
Yeah, and so with looking at the
There we
Australians that
go.
have been raced in the Australian Grand Prix and all, of course, Mark Webber had been the highest placing F1 driver from Australia in for a long time, and then eventually being, or I guess, well, you said Mark Webber
He was just on the
P
podium. I don't think
three.
he won. Yeah, I think he was P3.
Gotcha. Okay. Because I thought I had seen P5 was his top, but either way, like he for a long time had been kind of the top uh, Australian F1 driver. Recently, of course, Daniel Ricciardo is kind of notorious for having just not phenomenal races at Australia. He's actually had almost as many DNFs or disqualifications as he's had finishes. I think he's had 5 finishes and then 4 DNFs or disqualified. He was disqualified in 2014 due to a fuel flow issue at when they were checking the cars, I guess, after the race.
Hmm.
So his engine was getting a higher fuel flow than was allowed within the regulations. But DNF'd in 2013, DNF 2017, DNF 2019. Of course, we had a couple years without the Australian Grand Prix due to COVID.
Hmm.
And so he had kind of been uh, just always like looking for that big success at the Australian Grand Prix. with P4 being his highest. Oscar Piastri, now another Australian on the grid, finished P8 last year in his first Australian Grand Prix, so getting points in his first home race with McLaren at a time when they were still kind of struggling to figure out the car. But I think this year there's a good potential for Oscar to finish a little higher on the grid than that, based on McLaren's performance to start the year, and kind of the difference between how they started last year. But we have a number of winners on the grid. We have 5 total, with Alonso, Lewis being the only current driver who's a multi-time winner, winning in 2008 and 2015. Valtteri Bottas, Charles Leclerc, and Max Verstappen all being winners who are going to be competing this upcoming weekend.
Yeah, so interesting where, we have not a whole lot of, banger success from, Australian nationals. But what's interesting, to let, like you were doing, bringing the conversation up into kind of the modern era, lots of drivers who have previously won, the modern iteration of the Australian Grand Prix. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, it seems like Oscar Piastri may have the highest hopes of, bringing love to the Australian home team. But yeah, not too much success here recently.
Yeah, so there's I'm excited to look forward to the upcoming race weekend. We've
For
got
sure.
a lot of questions still about kind of who all's going to be, or like how the teams are going to be competing. It's still early in the season, but Carlos Sainz being one who there's still questions about if he'll be fully recovered from his appendicitis and surgery and everything to be able to race. He's been spotted apparently in Australia, which obviously makes sense. Like he's probably gonna be like, I'm racing until I'm told otherwise kind of thing. So hopefully, I mean, whichever way it ends up, hopefully just he and the doctors make the best decision for him to be able to have a solid rest of the season and not put himself potentially at risk if there's any concerns of him racing. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing him back. But either way, you just want the best in terms of his recovery and everything. But looking at some of the teams and kind of their expectations, it seems like Mercedes is still a bit shaken on not knowing exactly what their car is going, or what their performance is going to be like. There were reports that the sim data and the race data in the first couple of races just wasn't matching up, or their testing data or whatever they were getting from the computer programs was not quite matching up with what the actuality was during the races.
Right.
Which adds a lot of questions. So there's they've been talking about using Australia as kind of an experimental opportunity, and whether that means, I don't think it means they're throwing in the towel, of course. Like, their car is still good enough even without fully knowing setups and what's going to work best or what isn't working. They'll still probably be 2 drivers in the top 10. But I wouldn't be surprised to see some of the Flow Viz paint on the Mercedes, maybe even some of those the iron cage or the steel cage going around the wings to pick up data and everything.
Big data.
I think they're able to use those like during the season. I don't think it has to be just like testing sessions. But,
yeah, I don't think that's a testing only piece of equipment.
Yeah, if I remember correctly. So yeah, we'll probably see some interesting things, and it was just like looking at kind of this confusion or this difficulty that Mercedes is going through right now. They had gone with in Saudi Arabia after the Bahrain Grand Prix, looking to try and kind of tune their car for Saudi Arabia. They ended up going a different direction than really Red Bull, Ferrari, and McLaren in terms of their beam wings, which is a like small wing on the back of the car below the actual rear wing.
Okay.
That can add additional downforce or be kind of slimmed down to give higher top speeds and whatnot, which Mercedes still went with a larger beam wing to kind of still give them the downforce that they were looking for through some of the weaving sections in Jeddah, where Ferrari and McLaren both didn't run a beam wing, and Red Bull went with a pretty slimmed down one compared to Mercedes. So even in that, they were not entirely sure about what the setup should be with their car for that race. And so it kind of shows that they still have a lot of questions, a lot to figure out. Of course, they are like a year behind at least everyone else when it comes to this style of the side pods and everything, because they've gone with a completely different design direction for multiple seasons before switching over. So they of course have some of the data from previous years from other teams, watching other teams and all, but I'd say in 2 years they're maybe half a year to a year behind still what some of these other cars like the Ferrari, the McLaren have kind of figured out in terms of those setups and parts and all.
Yeah, it's interesting because like a bunch of the stuff that we've been talking about with Mercedes is like an element that is different from other teams, but allows them a changeable condition to satisfy the variable conditions at different racetracks. It feels like they're sacrificing like on the day performance for this option to be able to tweak their setup moving forward. So it's like an interesting trade-off that they seem to be going with, like the changeable push-pull rods that they, have at the front of the car. All of these, the what we had talked about previously. So it just seems like they're going for a different obviously just a different approach, but in a way that is, well, okay, all right. Isn't that just in line with the Mercedes way of thinking? Like, you remember the DAS system, right? That allowed them to adapt to changeable conditions with a piece of equipment. So, that's right along the lines with what their philosophy seems to be with like new tech on their car.
Yeah, I think the difference that, or really the only difference, same mindset, but the difference is with I think with some of the DOS system, some of the other things that they had integrated into their car to enhance performance, they were already at the forefront of performance with the car at that point.
Sure.
And so
now,
so now they're utilizing that as a catch-up tool to kind of what do they call it in League of Legends? The catch-up mechanics or whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
But there's definitely a lot that they can benefit from or find out in terms of data from doing that. I think the only concern really for me is with doing all these changes and setups and the options that they have, they're almost giving themselves too many potential things to change, where they're not necessarily getting a constant to compare data against. But in general, I think they are constantly trying to find ways to be able to adjust their performance, improve it and everything. And so, yeah, that mindset of finding and leaving the room for them to figure things out is beneficial in the long run. It might make it a little challenging as they're shifting things around a lot currently. I'm gonna real quick just have Colleen grab Senna, so I'll be right back.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, we can just.
So, where were we?
Yeah, you were just finishing up your point about Mercedes and how they need to catch up a little bit, due to their kind of the engineering solutions that they have going on. We were talking about, looking forward to seeing if Carlos Sainz is going to be back. But yeah, you just want to talk about kind of expected results here for the race.
Yeah. So just in terms of kind of, I don't think we will see huge variations from what we've seen for the start of the season so far. I do have decent confidence in Aston Martin with this week because they have had the solid performance last year. They finished P3 and P4 with Fernando on the podium and Lance right behind him. Of course, Red Bull has been consistent so far this season and also did well last year with Max winning the race, as well as I think Checo had finished P2. Yeah, Checo, or no, Lewis was P2 last year. Checo finished P5. So hopefully Checo can have a better performance this year. He's had a good season, a good start of the season thus far. But I think the person that I'm kind of keeping an eye on just out of my own curiosity is Nico Hulkenberg, who had a really solid race last year, finished P7. In qualifying, he had made it to Q3, started P10. So with the Haas having that more consistent race pace and him being able to put in a solid qualifying performance last year to get that Haas into Q3 with how poor of a car it was. I think he's kind of my dark horse to keep an eye out for some points this weekend.
Interesting. Okay, gotcha. I think my kind of pick is a little further up the table. I'd be looking at McLaren this weekend. I'm interested to see how Oscar does, and just the team in general. I feel like has a pretty good start to the 24 season. So yeah, just kind of looking for that to continue, and then obviously the spice on top would be if Oscar's able to have an extraordinary kind of performance and day. So yeah, obviously that's where I'd be keeping my eyes towards.
Yeah, and also just here's to hoping that Danny Ricks has a nice weekend in the V carb there. So
Cheers.
yeah, I like seeing drivers perform well at their home races, and also it would be cool
Sure.
to see him have a nice weekend after kind of a one to forget in Saudi Arabia. But generally, I think those are my biggest things. I mean, as always, kind of keeping an eye on Williams now that they're in that close to points area. It seems like they've kind of overtaken what AlphaTauri was last year, where Yuki was putting the car P11 again and again and again. Now Alex Albon's kind of sneaking in there with his solid performances. So I would like to see Williams have a nice weekend and all. And I haven't looked at the weather, but that always has some potential to shake things up. It's typically dry, but as you had mentioned, we've had some pretty crazy rainy races down under as well. And so anything like that could easily shake up the weekend expectations.
Yeah, definitely an interesting one. Looking forward just to getting back to Formula One, obviously with the kind of off weekend. But yeah, just looking forward to the Australian Grand Prix coming up here. I hope everybody learned as much as we did. I'm looking forward to doing some more of these. I know I definitely learned a lot. But Aaron, let's take them on the cool down lap. We've got Rose, Thorn, and Seed for you guys this weekend. Aaron, why don't you start us off?
Sounds good. So my rose for this week, my uh, weekend, even though Colleen was away for a bachelorette party from Thursday through evening on Sunday, so it was just me and Senna doing our thing all weekend long. But I had a really productive weekend, which was good. I kind of not bailed. I just didn't commit to going out and doing all the St. Patrick's Day celebrations and everything, because I had been so like dead set on wanting to get out and do yard work and use all my new lawn tools, make the house, spruce it up, get it looking nice and everything. And so I had some yard work beers while I was hanging out, and just doing all sorts of stuff to kind of spruce up the house and everything, along with hanging out with Senna a lot, taking a lot of long walks. It's fun to just she's just such a character and has so much personality. It's funny to watch her going around and just like checking out new areas of the neighborhood, walking around together, just seeing how she interacts with other people, other dogs, and all. So it was a nice little dad and Dogter weekend. But yeah, that was a nice time.
I thought Dogter might have been in reference to like like a veterinarian. I thought that was just like a cute name for vet.
No, it was
Dogter.
supposed to be a kind of a play on like daddy daughter weekend.
Daughter, yep,
Yeah,
I get it.
so,
I got you now. Now, one question I just want to ask you real quick: have you, just based on conversations me and you have had previously, do you feel more comfortable and like kind of secure in the neighborhood where you walk with Senna now?
Yeah, like
That's sick.
I was never overly like, there were some questionable things at our last place. It was more in my mind for like her and Colleen feeling comfortable and safe. Like for me though, I feel like my being aware of my surroundings typically makes me feel comfortable where
Sure.
I'm at. So I had moments at our old place, but now it's just suburban life. I'm like, oh, I can just like walk outside and not have to worry about even dumb things like there just being a bunch of litter and trash on the grounds and whatnot. Like,
Yeah,
people clean up the neighborhood a bit more than just the main road that used to go by my apartment complex. So like not having to worry about Senna picking up random bits of trash and everything too is definitely makes it a bit more comfortable to just be going around and all with her.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so that's my my rose for this past week. My seed this upcoming weekend for my birthday. Colleen got some of my like friends from Philly and some people from up in New York to meet in like middle of New Jersey at this go-karting place. So we're gonna go do a little go-karting. I'm kind of curious, like I'm little curious just in anticipation of it. Like I feel like I'm like I should be good at this, and if I'm not, then that's going to be kind of embarrassing because I should know all the ins and outs of what I'm supposed to be doing. But I think either way it'll be good fun. But I'm kind of like curious on if I'm going to be good or not.
All you gotta do if you're not good is just throw around a bunch of racing terms as like excuses, and
I just couldn't get my tires into the right window.
Exactly. The draft, my drafting wasn't that great. I just missed the apex on a couple of turns. Like that's all you gotta say, and then they'll be like, yeah, whatever, dude.
Or I just take anyone out who's in front of me.
There you go, Lance Stroll style.
Yeah, but
no, I guess that would have been Pierre Gasly. No.
a little bit of this, a little bit of
Sure.
that.
All right. So
I
what's
can
your
take
thorn then?
inspirations from multiple drivers on the grid. But for my thorn this week is a little bit just like more personal and like kind of a bummer. But my family sends emails. It's weird. They send like mass emails to the family instead of like group texting people. But my granddad they're looking at moving him to like a assisted living kind of facility and everything. He's 95 for any new viewers to the show. So he's had a very long time in his home and everything, but recently started to decline a little bit, which is just it's a bummer. He's one of my favorite people. He's such a character when he is himself and just enjoyable to chat with and like kind of joke around, hang out around, and all. So it's just it's sad, but it's part of life. I'm trying not to get too down about it. He's still very fortunately, I know most people don't have grandparents that make it and are around that long. So it's been very good having him around, but I'm looking forward to hopefully getting some good time with him coming up soon. So
Yeah, for sure. And it's nice to hear that he'll just have a little bit of, a little bit of help around,
some better
around the
care.
house.
Yeah, he
Yeah, that's
needs it.
cool.
So it just 95 is a long time, and he was living on his own up until with like no one helping him out other than like my family who was local until he was like 93. So
Damn,
it's
dude.
pretty good.
Good on him.
Yeah, he's a trip. So yeah, shout out, pop up, but that's my rose thorn and seed for this week.
Nice. Quite a solid one. Happy to hear. So I'll start where you ended. So my thorn here is more of just like a recent thing, just something interesting to talk about. But a couple weeks ago, I had a client who I would just describe as generally unenthusiastic about the massage that I did for her. She wasn't unhappy. She didn't like want a refund. She was just like, yeah, I just don't think that was for me. She was like, I'm sure somebody would enjoy that. She was like,
Was
I don't think it was objectively bad. She
was
was just like,
she
it just wasn't for
coming?
me.
Was she coming for like I know you probably can't say too much, but was it more of a like wanting to just give it a shot, or was it like were there medical reasons that they were prescribed a massage? I guess.
I don't believe they were prescribed massage. I think
Okay.
they were looking to maybe treat, some kind of chronic issue. Just
Okay.
didn't believe that I would be able to like hit their needs. And fine,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff like it used to really like ruin me, but this one, not so much. I've been working kind of like pretty holistically on improving my massage form, and that's kind of the core of my thorn here is like, yeah, generally unenthusiastic client, but that also came at a time where like I was and am actively working at improving where what I had to change was like begin working with my core, where I was previously kind of just like working with my hands and arms to apply pressure, where I found like, okay, I'm not using like a large percentage of my body weight to apply pressure. So I began to kind of focus in and kind of take time in my sessions to be aware of that. And I've really like started to improve and started to like begin seeing kind of the true benefits of it. Like my forearm work is getting a lot better. I'm finding myself able to like hit deeper layers of muscle like without so like feeling like I'm working so hard. So interestingly, what you could allow yourself to take really hard, you just use as fuel and motivation to say like, yeah, there's always things to improve on, and here's what I'm actively doing like to improve on it.
Yeah.
So just kind of an interesting look at that.
Well, and I would also say it sounds like just from the person's perspective that they maybe didn't even know what they were looking for as a resolution for whatever issue they had. It maybe
Sure.
they're just like they're like, I've been trying stretching and it hasn't really helped with what I'm looking for. Maybe I'll try this. And then maybe that's not the answer. Maybe they need something different, or I don't know, some sort of anti-inflammatory supplements or change in diet or exercise or whatever else that might actually get them to the goal of whatever they're trying to fix compared to, and so maybe it just wasn't, like you said, they didn't say it was a bad massage, just like didn't really get what they were looking to at the end of it.
Yeah, and fair enough. I just always like to see what portion of that like I own, and then, can I do something about it? And you find sometimes you can do something about it. So just finding enjoyment in my massage improving and kind of seeing the benefits of that.
Nice.
So that's my thorn. Sort of. Thorn with a silver lining. I like to do that.
You always have those.
My rose here for the week is, the flower that grew out of my seed from last episode. The CS2 Copenhagen Major is upon us. I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but I do just want to say this. During one of the games, the casters were talking about like odd mechanics in games, and they were referencing a bunch of like Valorant mechanics without like actually like calling it out and saying what it was. And just like they just kept going for like 3 or 4 different things and just like laughing about them and like writing them off or whatever. And it just had me sat there just laughing, just really enjoying the cast and enjoying the games. And then, like we were talking about,
slapping out some anti-Valorant propaganda.
You have to, though, man. Like your game is the most important. Yeah. So, and then my man, Richard Lewis, I love him on the hosting desk. He's like been brutally honest for some of the teams that like haven't really shown up or have had like rough rounds or halves or whatever. So yeah, I've really enjoyed Richard Lewis's hosting. So that's my rose here for the week. And then my seed, which I don't know if you'll remember this one, but I find this very funny. So about a year ago, I came on our old podcast and I was like, bro, we've got it. We saved the money. We're getting this speaker system in the office. I was like, bro, we're getting this. That's still not in the ceiling. But I'll tell you what we do have. We have the down payment on the speakers and actually like an install date where we plan for them to come in, and we have things, nice. The day set aside. So we actually have it in the books now where I feel confident coming to you and telling you like, yeah, that's taken a year for us to get done, actually. But now I can confidently tell you that, man, we're going to have this nice new speaker system that's like been a year and a half coming.
Hey, it's a long time in the making, but it's of course an upgrade that you guys have wanted to have. You planned it out and all, but that is funny that it's taken a little while.
Dude, me and Sarah, our like top problem is like, okay, so we come up with an idea, but who starts it? That's always the question, and then it'll never get done.
The only advice I'll give you with this is just like you have to set some like deadlines for yourself, and because with my first job out of school down in Virginia, my boss just kind of was like, your job is to run this thing. And I would and he didn't give me anything to do. And I would just come up with things that I felt would improve our productivity or increase financials in whatever way, or decrease our different costs or whatnot, along with just doing my general things. And I would tell him about these things. And then in my my 1-year review, which I moved on to another hotel shortly after, but he was like, oh, one thing you need to work on is just getting things done on time. And I'm like, what do you mean on time? I gave myself projects to do, but I had never really set deadlines on them for myself, so they would just kind of drag out sometimes longer than I initially intended. But also I was like, it doesn't really matter because I'm the one who gave myself these projects. Like, it's not like it wasn't like he was like, I need this done by this date. I was like, yeah, so this is what I'm trying to work on and improve. And he was like, you're not doing it quick enough, even though I never told you anything or gave you any help. I'm like, thanks, man. But yeah,
Okay.
just giving deadlines, I feel like it helps kind of spur you to like start moving along with things in different instances personally. So
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we've got it in the books now, so we're definitely improving in some way. But I will remember that setting deadlines for yourself. But yeah, that is my rose, thorn, and seed here for the previous week.
very, very nice. I like that. That was a solid week and a solid episode as we're now kind of coming to the end of it. But just as a reminder to everyone out there, if you like what you're hearing from us and seeing from us and everything, our insight, our just banter and everything, don't forget to like, subscribe, check us out. We're on Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube for the video. We're looking forward to hopefully having some live streams for upcoming races during the year and everything. So keep an eye out. You can follow us on Twitter. But yeah, we appreciate everyone taking the time to spend with us this week.
Yeah, just wanted to say, along with Aaron, just wanted to say thank you very much for taking the time to listen. We Yeah, we're looking to hit 100 subscribers by the end of 2024, by the end of this season. So, if you enjoy what we're doing, like you said, subscribe, throw us a comment, let us know you're out there and enjoying the show. Tell a friend, most importantly, tell them we got the spiciest Formula 1 takes that could ever be had. But yeah, most of all, we really just appreciate you listening and being here for the conversation. So, thanks everybody. We'll see you on the next one. Peace out.
So yeah.